I stared at the crumpled piece of thermal paper in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it rushing in my ears. It was just a receipt for 2 lattes and a slice of lemon pound cake. But there was one impossible detail printed in faded black ink near the bottom. The timestamp read Tuesday, October 14th at 9:15 in the morning. It was from a coffee shop exactly 3 miles from our house. The problem was my husband David was supposedly 30,000 feet in the air right then. He was flying to a real estate conference in Seattle. He'd even sent me a text from the airport lounge saying he was boarding. I stood there in the middle of our bedroom, holding a tiny slip of paper. It was about to completely detonate my entire life. To understand what that receipt meant, you gotta understand the life I thought I was living. My name is Elena, and for 10 years, I honestly believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I'm an interior designer with my own firm, and I've always valued my independence. I was married to David. He was this charismatic, driven guy working as a regional director for a massive real estate firm. His job demanded constant travel, but I never really minded. We had a beautiful, sprawling home in a quiet suburb and a shared love for cooking. Our marriage felt like it was built on absolute, unshakable trust. I felt so safe within those walls. We were the couple that all our friends looked up to. We were the ones hosting the holiday parties and the impromptu wine nights. Everyone thought we had it all figured out. And then there was Chloe. If David was the love of my life, Chloe was the sister of my soul. We met on the first day of college and bonded instantly over our shared anxiety and big dreams. Chloe was the spontaneous, chaotic one, always chasing a new career or a new guy. I was her anchor. She was a permanent fixture in our house. She even had her own key and the alarm code. David and Chloe had this wonderful sibling-like banter. They'd tease each other mercilessly, and I just watched them from the kitchen. I felt so incredibly lucky that my favorite people loved each other. But looking back, the illusion didn't shatter all at once. The foundation of my reality started cracking in these tiny, almost imperceptible ways. It was a slow fade, like a photograph left out in the sun. It started with his phone. He began taking it into the bathroom with him, which he'd never done before. He claimed he was just reading industry news, but the screen was always locked the second I walked in. Then his password changed. For 8 years, it had been our wedding day. One night, I asked him to unlock it so I could order food while I was driving. He hesitated, turned the screen completely away from me, and typed a new code. When I asked about it, he blamed mandatory IT security updates at work. It sounded plausible, so I let it go. But then his routine shifted. His business trips started extending by a day here, a day there, always with some mysterious delay. He started wearing this new expensive woody cologne that I definitely hadn't bought for him. When I brought it up, he just smiled smoothly. He told me a client had gifted it to him. He started working out obsessively too. Suddenly, he had this whole new wardrobe of tailored suits and high-end casual wear. He was completely reinventing himself right in front of me, and I was too blind to see why. Whenever I expressed even a hint of insecurity, he'd flip it on me. He would sigh heavily and look at me with this exhausting pity. He'd say he was working himself to the bone for our future. He told me it broke his heart that I didn't trust him. He made me feel so guilty for just missing him and completely irrational for noticing the distance. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, and I fell for it completely. Chloe's behavior changed around the same time, though I didn't connect the dots. She stopped complaining about her dating life entirely. She just seemed so calm, settled, and financially stable in a way she never had been before. She told me she just landed this massive freelance client who was paying her a huge retainer. I was so thrilled for her. I even took her out to dinner to celebrate. But then there were these really strange moments. Like this one time I was crying to her over coffee, totally terrified that David was pulling away from me. Instead of having my back, she just squeezed my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and told me I was suffocating him with my paranoia. She gaslit me with a smile. Then came this crisp Thursday morning in early November. David had been back from his supposed Seattle trip for 2 weeks, and I was deep cleaning our bedroom closet. I grabbed the gray wool suit he wore the day he left. As I checked the pockets for the dry cleaner, my fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper. I pulled it out, expecting a luggage tag. Instead, I smoothed it out on the bed and read the details. 2 lattes and a slice of lemon pound cake. But there was this one impossible detail printed in faded black ink. The timestamp read Tuesday, October 14th at 9:15 in the morning. I just stood there, totally frozen. My brain was desperately scrambling to find some kind of logical explanation for what I was looking at, because at 8:45 that exact morning, he had texted me a photo from the airport lounge. He said he was boarding his flight to Seattle and that he loved me. The airport was an hour away from that coffee shop. It was physically impossible for him to be boarding a plane and then buying coffee in our hometown 30 minutes later. A cold, heavy dread just completely settled in the pit of my stomach. My hands started shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, literally struggling to catch my breath. I opened up my texts and scrolled all the way back to October 14th. I just stared at that photo he sent me. I pinched the screen and zoomed in as close as I could. I looked right at the window behind him in the picture. I started studying the reflection in the glass. And then I finally saw it. It was super faint, but it was definitely there. The reflection of a neon sign in the window of his supposed airport lounge. It wasn't an airport at all. It was a local sports bar, literally 2 miles from our house. He took the photo there, framed it super tight to look like a terminal, sent it, and then went to get coffee. He never even went to Seattle. The realization hit me so hard it felt like a physical blow. I just dropped my phone. I slowly slid off the edge of the bed and right onto the floor. I pulled my knees up tight to my chest. I couldn't even cry. The shock was just way too deep for tears. For a solid hour, I just sat there on the cold hardwood, staring blankly at the wall. The entire architecture of my life was just collapsing around me. He was lying. He'd been lying for months, maybe even years. All those trips, the delays, the late nights at the office, it was all a complete fabrication. But then a new question hit me. Who was that second latte for? Who takes oat milk in their coffee? The answer flashed into my mind so fast, it literally made me nauseous. Chloe. It was Chloe. She always drank oat milk lattes. And Chloe absolutely loved lemon pound cake. Suddenly, it all made sense. Chloe being so weirdly defensive of David lately. Chloe showing up with all that brand new, expensive jewelry. The thought was so monstrous, so completely devastating, I actually tried to push it out of my head. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. My husband and my best friend? It felt like some terrible, cruel joke. But deep down, in that quiet part of my soul I'd been ignoring for a year, I knew it was true. When the initial shock finally passed, it was replaced by something else. A profound, icy clarity. I didn't confront him when he came home that night. I didn't scream, throw plates, or demand answers. If I confronted him now with just a receipt and a text, he'd just lie. He'd spin some web of excuses, call me crazy, and cover his tracks. He was a master negotiator at work. He'd use those same skills to make me doubt my own sanity. I realized right then that I wasn't dealing with my husband anymore. I was dealing with an adversary. And to defeat an adversary, I needed ammunition. I needed undeniable, bulletproof proof. The next morning, after David left for the office, I started my investigation. I went straight to our home office. I started digging through the filing cabinets, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Our finances had always been combined. We had joint checking, savings, and investment accounts. I handled the daily bills, but David managed the big investments and his business expenses. I logged into our banking portal to see what I could find. On the surface, everything looked totally normal. The balances were healthy, and the mortgage was paid. But as I dug deeper, downloading months of statements and comparing them line by line, I noticed a pattern. Every month for the past 2 years, there were large withdrawals from our high-yield savings. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. The descriptions were always vague, like capital transfer or investment allocation. I didn't recognize the destination accounts at all. I tried to trace them, but I just hit a wall. I realized pretty quickly that I was out of my depth. I needed a professional. I needed someone who understood the mechanics of betrayal and financial retribution. I needed an ally. So I spent hours researching family law attorneys in the city. I bypassed the flashy firms with billboards. I was looking for a specific kind of reputation. Finally, I found him, Arthur Sterling. His reviews didn't mention his bedside manner. They mentioned his absolute devastation of opposing counsel. I called his office right away and explained the urgency of my situation. I wasn't going to wait around. I secured a private consultation for the very next Tuesday. Walking into Arthur Sterling's office felt like crossing a threshold into a totally different world. There was no chaotic noise, no ringing phones. Just this heavy, significant silence that smelled like old paper and leather. Arthur was this formidable guy in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. He had silver hair and these piercing ice blue eyes. You could tell instantly that he missed absolutely nothing. He didn't offer any false sympathy or try to patronize me. He just leaned back in his leather chair and listened. I laid out the whole timeline, the receipts, and my agonizing suspicion about Chloe. When I finally finished, the room was dead quiet for a long moment. Arthur just looked at me. His expression was completely unreadable as he steepled his fingers. Then he finally spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a judge rendering a verdict. He told me that anger is loud, and anger makes mistakes. He said that power, on the other hand, is completely silent. Power gathers evidence. Ruthless and patient, power waits for the perfect moment to strike. He laid out the harsh legal reality. If I was right, David wasn't just breaking his vows. He was actively stealing marital assets to fund a secondary life, which the courts view as financial dissipation. To crush him, Arthur said we needed to find the bottom of the well. He told me I had to become an actress. I had to play the happily oblivious wife while we dismantled his life brick by brick. Arthur brought in a forensic accountant to trace every single cent. I sat at that massive mahogany desk and signed a mountain of authorization forms. I gave them access to every scrap of financial data attached to my name. The next 3 weeks were the most grueling period of my life. I had to live in the same house and breathe the same air as the man who was destroying me. I watched him get ready for work, pretending everything was perfectly normal. I listened to him complain about his stressful days at the office. I'd nod sympathetically, while my mind was just screaming. It was absolute torture playing the role of the happily oblivious wife. But the hardest part was dealing with Chloe. Thanksgiving was coming up, and it was tradition for her to spend it with us. The idea of having her sit at my table made me physically ill, but Arthur had been clear. Change nothing. Any deviation from the norm could tip them off. So I hosted Thanksgiving, spending 2 days prepping the turkey like nothing was wrong. On Thursday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Chloe standing there, holding a bottle of expensive wine. She was beaming at me with that fake, radiant glow. She hugged me tightly. I felt her arms wrap around my shoulders and smelled her familiar perfume. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to push her down the front steps. Instead, I squeezed her back. So I forced a bright, cheerful smile onto my face and welcomed her in. I played the perfect host, while a cold, dark fury solidified in my chest. The dinner was a masterclass in psychological endurance. The 3 of us sat around the table, the candlelight flickering against the crystal. I just sat there, watching them play house in my home. Once you know the truth, the hidden language of an affair becomes glaringly obvious. I saw the way his eyes lingered on her when she laughed. It was a look he hadn't given me in years. I saw the subtle shift in her posture, leaning toward him whenever he spoke. I caught the brief, secret glances they exchanged right in front of me. They really thought I was completely blind. At one point during dinner, Chloe reached across the table for her wine glass. As she moved, the sleeve of her silk blouse slipped up. It revealed a stunning, delicate gold bracelet that caught the candlelight beautifully. I kept my voice perfectly light and admiring as I complimented the jewelry. I told her it was a gorgeous bracelet and mentioned that I hadn't seen it before. I was playing the role of the supportive best friend flawlessly. Chloe froze for a fraction of a second. A micro-expression of sheer panic flashed across her face as she quickly darted her eyes toward David. She recovered with a slightly too high laugh, claiming she had just treated herself. David immediately cleared his throat and looked fixedly down at his plate. He took a long, nervous sip of his wine, completely avoiding my gaze. Meanwhile, I warmly told Chloe that she deserved to treat herself for all her hard work. I wanted to vomit right there at the table. I knew with absolute, sickening certainty that my husband had bought her that bracelet. I sat there, calmly carving the turkey, playing the perfect host, while a cold, dark fury solidified in my chest. I was watching them play house in my own home, mocking me right to my face. They thought I was a fool, completely blind to their betrayal. They had no idea that a ruthless lawyer was currently preparing to drop a nuclear bomb on their stolen lives. 2 days after Thanksgiving, Arthur called me back into his office. When I arrived, Elias, the forensic accountant, was already there, looking grim but deeply satisfied. They had finally found the bottom of the well. Elias handed me a thick, heavily bound folder across the mahogany desk. He quietly told me that the situation was far worse than we had originally thought. My husband wasn't just funding hotel rooms and dinners. Over the next hour, they walked me through the devastating reality of my marriage. David had quietly formed a limited liability company called C&D Ventures. He had methodically siphoned over $250,000 from our joint investment accounts. But the stolen money wasn't even the worst part. Elias turned to a specific page and slid a copy of a commercial lease agreement across the desk. It was a lease for a luxury penthouse apartment, with David as the primary leaseholder and Chloe listed as the secondary occupant. He didn't just buy her a bracelet. He bought her a whole life. He was paying her rent, her bills, everything. That big freelance client she bragged about? It didn't exist. Then Elias showed me the credit card statements. The purchases told a sickening story. Thousands of dollars dropped at high-end furniture stores. Receipts for matching luxury robes. Even a $2,000 espresso machine? I sat back in the leather chair. The air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. This wasn't just a mistake. He hadn't just slipped up in a moment of weakness. He had plotted and calculated this whole double life. He did all of this while coming home and kissing me on the forehead. I looked at Arthur. My voice was barely a whisper, but it was steady. I just asked him, "What do we do?" Arthur leaned forward. His eyes were burning with this cold, professional intensity. He looked right at me and said, "Now we strike, but we do it precisely." He explained that using marital funds for an affair is financial dissipation. In the eyes of the court, it's theft. We were going to file for divorce. But first, we were filing an ex parte motion. We were going to freeze every single one of his accounts. Because we had proof he was draining our assets. A judge would grant the freeze without even notifying him. We'd lock him out of the LLC, his personal accounts, everything. Arthur said we'd cut off his oxygen before he even realized he was suffocating. I asked him when we were going to do it. Arthur checked his calendar. It was the first week of December. He said we needed to prepare the filings and get the judge's signature. He wanted to time the execution for maximum impact. He asked when David usually transferred the funds for the penthouse. Elias checked his notes. He said David always moved a large lump sum on the 24th of every month, right before the holidays. Like clockwork. Arthur smiled. It was this terrible, beautiful smile. He looked up and said, "Then the freeze goes into effect on the morning of December 24th. Merry Christmas, David." The next 3 weeks were just a total blur of adrenaline and legal paperwork. I spent hours locked in Arthur's office, reviewing every single line of the divorce petition. I signed stack after stack of sworn affidavits detailing the timeline of the affair and the stolen money. Back at the house, I was basically a ghost inhabiting my own body. I drafted a massive, comprehensive inventory of our entire home. I made sure every single asset, every piece of art, and every piece of furniture was perfectly accounted for. The holidays were in full swing, which meant putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. David and I decorated the tree together, like nothing was wrong. I'd hand him an ornament and smile, while in my head, I was picturing him signing the lease for Chloe's penthouse. We went to all the usual holiday parties, holding hands and posing for pictures. It was a terrifying, exhausting tightrope walk. There were moments when he'd kiss my cheek, and the sheer audacity of it would make my vision go dark with rage. Then Chloe came over to bake cookies, laughing and gossiping with me in the kitchen. I played right along with her little game. But secretly, I was just imagining the look on her face when her sugar daddy's credit cards finally stopped working. Whenever she'd text me some inside joke, the betrayal threatened to completely overwhelm me. But I held on. I kept remembering Arthur's words, that real power is completely silent. So I channeled all that grief into cold, hard focus. I started making my own moves behind the scenes. I packed a small bag of essentials and hid it deep in the trunk of my car. I was building a fortress, preparing for the siege that was about to come. Late at night, I quietly changed all my personal passwords. I opened a new, separate bank account at a totally different institution. I made absolutely sure my own business assets were locked down and completely out of his reach. Then came the afternoon of December 23rd. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a single text message from Arthur. The judge signed the order, the banks were notified, and the freeze would execute at exactly midnight. I deleted the text message and set the phone back down. I closed my eyes and exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 straight months. The trap was set. It was finally done. It was finally done. Christmas Eve morning rolled in with a fresh blanket of snow. The house was dead quiet. I was up way before dawn, just sitting by the tree with my coffee. For the first time in months, I felt this deep, profound peace. Around 7:30, I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. He wandered into the kitchen wearing his expensive silk pajamas, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. He had absolutely no idea his entire world had just been dismantled. He poured himself some coffee, walked over and kissed the top of my head. It took everything in me not to physically flinch. Then he headed over to the kitchen island to start his usual morning routine. He sat down at the marble island and flipped open his laptop. This was his daily ritual. Every single morning, he'd check his emails and review his bank balances before doing anything else. I just stayed on the sofa, sipping my coffee in total silence. I watched him over the rim of my mug. I was just waiting for the exact moment the reality of the freeze hit him. For a few minutes, the only sound was him typing away. Then, the clicking just stopped. I saw his shoulders stiffen up. He leaned closer to the screen, looking totally confused. He let out this quiet mutter of frustration. He grabbed his phone, dialed a number, and held it to his ear. I knew he was calling the bank, but it was Christmas Eve, so they were running on automated systems. He hung up and his face went completely pale. Looking desperate, he pulled a credit card from his wallet and typed the numbers into his laptop. A harsh beep echoed in the kitchen. Declined. He tried another card, then the debit card for his secret LLC. Declined again. He started sweating, full-on panic mode. He grabbed his phone and started texting frantically, probably warning Chloe that the money was gone. I watched him melt down for a second before I finally spoke. I just asked, "Everything okay?" in this perfectly calm, breezy voice. He jumped out of his skin and slammed the laptop shut. He mumbled some excuse about a glitch and practically ran to his office. He scurried off to his office like a cornered rat. I just sat by the tree, soaking in the absolute silence. It was the best feeling. The trap was sprung, and his oxygen was cut off. We were supposed to host a Christmas Eve brunch at 11. And, of course, Chloe was coming. She'd never miss a chance to play the loving bestie while secretly gloating over the life she stole. Right at 10:45, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was. She had on this stunning red cashmere coat and was holding a perfectly wrapped gift. She looked absolutely flawless, just totally radiant and completely untouched by any consequence. She chirped, "Merry Christmas Eve," and leaned right in to hug me. I didn't step back, but I definitely wasn't hugging her back. I just stood there like a statue, letting her wrap her arms around my rigid shoulders.
I told her to come in and that David was in the living room.
My voice was completely deadpan. She breezed right past me, casually kicking off her boots. I shut the door and slowly, deliberately locked the deadbolt behind her. I followed her into the living room. David was standing by the fireplace, clutching a glass of bourbon, which is pretty early for a drink, even for a holiday. He looked like a guy standing on the deck of a sinking ship, just totally ashen. Chloe walked right up to him with this bright, oblivious smile on her face. She said, "Hey, you," in this super intimate voice she thought I was too dumb to notice. She had absolutely no clue the ground had already caved in beneath them. David didn't even try to smile back. He just stared at her for a second, and then slowly looked over at me. You could actually see the terrifying realization dawn in his eyes. He finally registered how chillingly calm I was. The whole room went dead silent. The only thing you could hear was the fire crackling. I didn't scream, and I definitely didn't cry. I just walked straight over to the glass coffee table, keeping my eyes locked right on him. Sitting perfectly centered on the glass was the thick manila envelope, the one holding his absolute ruin. I reached down and picked it up. I could feel the heavy weight of the divorce petition right there in my hands. I walked right up to him and held out the envelope. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Merry Christmas, David." My voice was completely flat. There was zero emotion left in me. He stared at it like it was a live grenade. He reached out so slowly, his hands literally shaking as he took it. The arrogant guy I married was already starting to disappear. He pulled the tab and slid the papers out. Right on top was the divorce petition, fully stamped. Behind that was the forensic accounting report and the lease for their luxury penthouse. I watched his eyes dart across the pages. I literally watched his entire world crumble in real time. All the color drained right out of his face. He looked like a terrified, cornered animal. He opened his mouth to spin a lie, but nothing came out. He just looked from the papers to me and then to Chloe. She stepped forward, suddenly sounding really anxious, asking him what was going on. His hands just went slack and he dropped everything. The papers scattered all over the rug. And right there, face up at Chloe's feet, was the highlighted lease agreement. Chloe looked down at the mess. Her eyes locked right onto her name, highlighted next to his on the penthouse lease. She let out this ragged gasp and stumbled backward, like I'd just hit her. I just stood there and looked at her. My best friend, the woman I loved like a sister, the same woman who wore stolen jewelry at my Thanksgiving table while looking me in the eye and calling me crazy. I didn't yell, but my voice cut through the room like a knife. "Your rent check didn't clear this morning, Chloe," I said. And it never will again. The accounts are frozen. The money's gone. You have nothing. Her flawless face just twisted into pure panic. She looked at David, silently begging him to fix it, to spin some kind of lie. But David just stood there, totally broken. The paper trail was absolute. He had nothing left to give her. David started stammering, his voice cracking as tears welled up. He begged me to let him explain, swearing it wasn't what it looked like. He actually called a 2-year double life a mistake that meant nothing. I just laughed. It was this short, dry sound without an ounce of humor. I asked if a luxury penthouse and $250,000 were just little mistakes. I told him he didn't get to manage this situation anymore. Then I turned to Chloe. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, playing the victim like she always did. She reached out toward me, sobbing that she was sorry and that they just fell in love. I stepped back so she couldn't reach me. I dropped my voice to a whisper and told her not to touch me. I told her she didn't fall in love. She found a sponsor. She found a guy willing to steal from his wife to fund her lifestyle. I reminded her how she sat at my table, drank my wine, and told me I was crazy, all while sleeping in a bed bought with my money. I looked at the woman who used to be my sister, and I felt nothing. I told her she was a ghost to me now. I turned back to David. He was fully crying now, begging me, promising we could go to counseling. He swore he'd end it with her right there. He wasn't mourning the loss of his wife. He was mourning the loss of his money. I just looked at my watch. I told him he had exactly 2 hours. He needed to go upstairs, pack 2 suitcases, and get out of my house. I told him he wasn't taking anything we bought together. I told him to leave his keys on the counter. He definitely wasn't taking the car since the lease was in my name. I made it crystal clear. If he wasn't gone by 1 o'clock, I was calling the cops to have him forcibly removed. He wept, asking where he was supposed to go since his cards were declined. I looked at them and said I didn't care. I told him to go enjoy the penthouse view, but that the eviction process was starting on the 1st. They tried to beg, but I was done. I walked into the kitchen, poured some coffee, and watched the snowfall. I could hear David frantically packing and Chloe sobbing in the hallway. The romance was officially dead. At 12:45, the front door opened and closed. I heard the lock click, and the house fell completely silent. I walked into the hallway. It was empty. His keys were just sitting there on the console table. I walked over to the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and leaned against the wood. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 2 months, I cried. Not tears of heartbreak. They were tears of absolute, profound relief. The infection was gone. I had survived. The divorce was swift and merciless. The evidence of his financial theft was just too overwhelming. Plus, Arthur Sterling was a terrifying force of nature in the courtroom. David's lawyers told him to settle immediately if he wanted to avoid total public ruin. I kept the house. I kept my business. And I recovered every single cent he had stolen from us, extracted directly from his share of the assets. David actually lost his job when his company found out about the legal mess and the financial irregularities. Without his income, he couldn't afford that luxury penthouse. He and Chloe were evicted 3 months later. The stress of having absolutely no money and facing public disgrace tore them apart almost immediately. They turned on each other. Turns out, a stolen life is only beautiful when someone else is paying for it. I rebuilt my life. I repainted the walls, bought new furniture, and filled my home with people who actually loved me. I learned that my capacity for resilience was way bigger than my capacity for denial. The truth, no matter how devastating, is always better than a comfortable lie. Welcome to the end of today's entry in Karma's Diary. If you've ever felt the cold sting of betrayal or the confusion of being gaslit, listen closely. Lesson 1. Trust your intuition over their gaslighting. When someone's words don't match their actions, always believe their actions. That gut feeling you get when something feels wrong, that's your body's survival mechanism. Don't let anyone convince you that your reality is a delusion. Lesson 2. Silence is your greatest weapon. When you discover a betrayal, resist the urge to scream and demand answers without leverage. Step back, breathe, and gather your proof in the shadows. Power isn't loud. Power is prepared. Lesson 3. Dignity is the most devastating form of revenge. You don't need to lower your standards or beg for closure from people who never respected you in the first place. The ultimate victory is calmly removing their access to your life, securing your assets, and walking away with your head held high. Let them drown in the chaos they created. Thank you for opening the diary with me today. Stay strong, know your worth, and let karma handle the rest. I often think back to that crumpled thermal receipt. At the time, it felt like a death sentence for my marriage. But now, I see it for what it truly was. A ticket to my freedom. David had spent years crafting the perfect facade. He believed his tailored suits and charismatic smile made him untouchable. He thought he could outsmart everyone, especially me. But arrogance is a fragile shield. When the paper trail was laid bare, his negotiation skills meant nothing. The truth stripped him of his power instantly. And then there was Chloe. She traded a decade of genuine sisterhood for a temporary illusion of luxury. She wanted the designer coats and diamonds without putting in the work. She learned the hard way that a stolen life comes with a devastating price tag. When the funds dried up, the romance evaporated. It left them both with nothing but resentment and debt. I owe my survival to the cold, calculating brilliance of Arthur Sterling. He taught me that anger is loud and sloppy, but true power is completely silent. He showed me how to dismantle an adversary brick by brick. Today, my home is no longer a monument to a comfortable lie. It is a sanctuary of my own making. I repainted the walls and replaced the memories. I filled these rooms with genuine laughter and authentic love. The scars of betrayal never completely fade, but they do stop hurting. They become reminders of what you survived. I learned that my capacity for resilience is infinitely greater than my capacity for denial. So, to anyone out there sitting on the cold floor, feeling like your entire world has just collapsed around you, I want you to know that this is not the end of your story. It is the painful beginning of your best chapter. Remember, being underestimated is just the first step to becoming unstoppable. Gather your evidence, secure your peace, and walk away with your head held high. Stay strong, know your worth, and let karma handle the rest. People always ask me if I ever heard from them again. Honestly, when you cut off the money and the access, toxic people just fade into their own chaos. I never felt the need to stalk their social media or track their downfall. I just let go. The universe has a really efficient way of balancing the scales when you finally step back. Instead of obsessing over their ruin, I poured all that energy into my design firm. And without that constant draining anxiety weighing me down, my business absolutely exploded. I took my own home back too. I redesigned every single room. I stripped away the old colors and the tainted memories and replaced them with light and warmth. That kitchen island where Chloe used to sit and lie to my face, it's now where I host my real friends. Women who actually have my back, who don't wear masks. Arthur Sterling actually still sends me a Christmas card every year. It's just a simple, heavy piece of cardstock, a quiet little nod from the man who helped me burn the illusion to the ground. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and I barely recognize myself. The woman who collapsed on the floor over a coffee receipt? She feels like a completely different person. That old version of me was soft, and she was so desperate to keep the peace. But the woman who replaced her, She knows her exact worth, and she is absolutely unbreakable. Betrayal is like a fire that burns down everything you thought you knew. But once the smoke clears, you get to decide what you build on the ashes. And I chose to build a fortress. So if you're in the dark right now, feeling like you can't survive the pain, just keep walking. The dawn is coming, and trust me, it's gonna be beautiful. Welcome to the end of today's entry in Karma's diary. If you've ever felt that cold sting of betrayal, or the maddening confusion of being gaslit by the people you love most, I want you to listen closely. Here are 3 lessons from today's story. Lesson 1. Trust your intuition over their gaslighting. When someone's words don't match their actions, you've got to believe their actions. That gut feeling you have? That quiet alarm bell ringing in your soul when something feels off. That's just your body's survival mechanism kicking in. Don't let anyone, not your partner, not your best friend, convince you that your reality is a delusion. If you find yourself having to ask for the truth over and over again, you already know they're lying. Lesson 2. Silence is your absolute greatest weapon when gathering evidence. When you first discover a betrayal, your immediate instinct is going to be to confront them. You'll want to scream, throw things, and demand answers. You have to resist that urge. Confrontation without leverage just gives them a chance to hide their tracks. It lets them manipulate the narrative and call you crazy. So step back. Just breathe. Gather your proof in the shadows. Consult the right professionals. Build your fortress before you ever declare war. Because real power isn't loud. Power is prepared. Lesson 3. Dignity is the most devastating form of revenge. You don't need to destroy yourself just to destroy them. You don't have to lower your standards, scream in the streets, or beg for closure, especially not from people who never respected you in the first place. The ultimate victory is calmly removing their access to your life. Secure your assets and walk away with your head held high. Let them drown in the chaos they created. Meanwhile, you get to build a beautiful, peaceful life completely without them. Thank you for opening the diary with me today. Always remember, being underestimated is just the first step to becoming unstoppable. Stay strong, know your worth, and let karma handle the rest. Looking back now, the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the terrifying blank slate that came right after the dust finally settled. When you've spent a decade building a life with someone, tearing it down leaves a massive, echoing void. But as a designer, I know a void is just an empty room waiting to be transformed. I threw myself entirely into my work. I took on bigger clients, bolder projects, and poured every ounce of my restless energy into creating beautiful, honest spaces. I started the real healing with my own home. I stripped away the old paint, got rid of the furniture we bought together, and erased every lingering shadow of his presence. It wasn't just about redecorating the house.
It was an exorcism.
I was reclaiming my sanctuary, inch by inch, until it finally felt like it belonged entirely to me. And then I filled it with real warmth. I hosted dinners again, but this time, the laughter echoing off the walls was genuine. No hidden agendas, no secret lives. I realized that the love I thought I had lost wasn't actually gone. It was just misplaced. I had been giving it to people who were only pretending to hold it. Now I give that energy to my friends, to my business, and most importantly, to myself. I learned how to be my own anchor, my own fierce protector. Sometimes I think about the woman I was a year ago, crying on the hardwood floor over a coffee receipt. I wish I could go back and tell her how beautiful it gets. The truth shattered my world, but it also set me free. And honestly, I wouldn't trade this hard-won peace for a million comfortable lies. Welcome to the end of today's entry in Karma's diary. If you've ever felt the cold sting of betrayal, I want you to listen closely. Or maybe you know the maddening confusion of being gaslit by the people you love most. Well, here are 3 lessons from today's story. Lesson 1. Trust your intuition over their gaslighting. When someone's words don't match their actions, you've got to believe their actions. That gut feeling you have? That quiet alarm bell ringing in your soul when something feels off? That's your body's survival mechanism. Don't let anyone, not your partner, not your best friend, convince you that your reality is a delusion. If you have to keep asking for the truth, you already know they're lying. Lesson 2. Silence is your absolute greatest weapon when you're gathering evidence. When you discover a betrayal, your first instinct is going to be to scream and demand answers. Resist that urge. Confronting without leverage just gives them a chance to hide their tracks. Step back, breathe, and gather your proof in the shadows. Build your fortress before you declare war. Power is prepared. Lesson 3. Dignity is the most devastating form of revenge. You don't need to lower your standards, scream in the streets, or beg for closure from people who never respected you. The ultimate victory is calmly removing their access to your life, securing your assets, and walking away. Let them drown in their own chaos, while you build a beautiful life without them. Thank you for opening the diary with me today. Remember, being underestimated is just the first step to becoming unstoppable. Stay strong, know your worth, and let karma handle the rest. I didn't just win the divorce, I reclaimed my entire space. The first thing I did was repaint those walls and get rid of every piece of furniture he ever touched. It felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. My business exploded after the dust settled. I poured all that leftover energy into my firm, and we landed 3 massive commercial contracts in a month. Turns out, when you aren't carrying dead weight, you can run pretty fast. As for David, the corporate world doesn't take kindly to executives who steal. He lost his job, his reputation, and without his income, the penthouse was a ticking clock. 3 months later, the eviction notice finally hit the door. It's funny how fast true love dies when the credit cards get declined. Chloe didn't sign up for a broke, disgraced, middle-aged man. They turned on each other almost instantly, blaming one another for the mess they made. I filled my house with people who actually loved me. No more walking on eggshells, no more fake smiles at Thanksgiving. Just real friends, good wine, and a peace so deep I can't even describe it. Sometimes I just stand in my kitchen and listen to the quiet. It used to be a lonely silence when he was away on his fake trips. Now it's just mine. And it's the best sound in the world. Taking off that ring was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. I felt like dropping 100-pound weight off my chest. I'm not Elena, the betrayed wife, anymore. I'm just Elena. They thought they could drain my accounts and leave me with nothing. But they forgot who actually built our life in the first place. I didn't just survive the fire. I bought the whole damn building. I heard David is renting a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town now. No luxury suits, no fancy dinners, and definitely no Chloe. Turns out, a stolen life is only beautiful when someone else is paying for it. If you're going through this right now, I promise you, the pain doesn't last forever. You are so much stronger than the lies they told you. Keep your head up, secure your peace, and let karma do the heavy lifting. Welcome to the end of today's entry in Karma's diary. If you've ever felt the cold sting of betrayal, I want you to listen closely. Here are 3 lessons from today's story. Lesson 1. Trust your intuition over their gaslighting. When someone's words do not match their actions, you gotta believe their actions. That gut feeling you have, that quiet alarm bell ringing in your soul when something feels wrong, is your body's survival mechanism. Don't let anyone convince you that your reality is a delusion. Lesson 2. Silence is your greatest weapon when gathering evidence. When you discover a betrayal, your first instinct is going to be to confront, to scream, to demand answers. Resist that urge. Confronting without leverage only gives the betrayer a chance to hide their tracks and manipulate the narrative. Step back, breathe, and gather your proof in the shadows. Consult professionals. Build your fortress before you declare war. Remember, power is not loud. Power is meticulously prepared. Lesson 3. Dignity is the most devastating form of revenge. You don't need to destroy yourself to destroy them. You don't need to lower your standards, scream in the streets, or beg for closure from people who never respected you in the first place. The ultimate victory is calmly removing their access to your life. Legally secure your assets and walk away with your head held high. Let them drown in the chaos they created, while you build a beautiful, peaceful life without them. Thank you for opening the diary with me today. Remember, being underestimated is just the first step to becoming unstoppable. Stay strong, know your worth, and let karma handle the rest. Thank you so much for opening the diary with me today. It's not always easy to revisit the darkest chapters of your life. But sharing this story is the final step in taking my power back. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Being underestimated is just the first step to becoming completely unstoppable. They thought I would just roll over and let them take everything. You have to stay strong when your whole world feels like it's collapsing. It's terrifying, but you will get through it. You gotta know your worth and refuse to settle for anything less. Once you secure your peace, the rest just falls into place. You don't have to get your hands dirty trying to get revenge. Just walk away with your dignity and let karma handle the rest. Karma has a funny way of finding the people who think they got away with it. Keep your head up, trust your gut, and never apologize for protecting yourself. Until next time, take care of yourselves.